from the MCPLive.tv studios, located in downtown Conroe, it's the Conroe Art League, live.
Hello, and welcome to Cal Live, the show that brings you what you need to know about the Conroe Art League, its talented artists, and the wonderful people who make it such an amazing part of the Conroe community. My name is Susan Gramachis. I'm your host, and I am delighted today to have my guest, Brett Hall. Brett is a former president of the Conroe Art League and a very talented artist who focuses primarily on historically accurate portraits of Native Americans. He actually calls himself an artist activist, and we're going to explore that and delve into that in just a minute. But first, a little background about Brett. He was born and raised in Kansas, the son of a wheat farmer. He's been married for over 45 years to his beautiful wife, Bev, and they have twin sons and 5 grandchildren. There is a very interesting personal anecdote that I am can't wait to explore with him. After he completed his studies at the Colorado Institute of Art, which is a commercial art school, he took off on a backpacking trip through Europe for 3 months and met his idol, Salvador Dali, and Salvador's wife, Gala, and I can't wait to talk to him about that experience. Must have been fascinating for him. Following his professional career, he became a commercial artist. He found, but he really found his calling in the historically accurate portraits of Native Americans, and I want to find out about how that all came about too. So we are going to get right into our interview. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you.
I am so thrilled to have you here as my guest, and I'm really looking forward to our interview.
Well, I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, we'll get started. You attended Colorado Institute of Art in Denver and then became a commercial artist. So was it your intention to go into that career?
Well, it was out of what I deemed necessary or the prudent thing to do. My father passed away when I was in 4th grade. And my mother, having been, the quintessential farm wife that moved to town, et cetera, had no clue, of the business and the numbers and et cetera. And I was the youngest sibling. And she managed to put the other 3 through college, but I did not want her to spend that money. I don't think we'll find a way, and I said no. So I chose Colorado Institute of Art because it was a commercial art school, and it was a 2-year course. My brother was living in Denver, so that took one expense out of it, and I could in 2 years get out and get to work and be self-sufficient. People told me, hey, if you're going to be an artist, you better find a way to eat.
To support yourself, right, right.
So I went down that path, and it was the 70s and logos and magazine illustrations. It was a very vibrant time for commercial art. Mark English and different illustrators were in their heyday. And so I did everything from newspaper paste up, and this is back when you had to cut the pieces of type, wax the back of them, and put them down on grid paper, use border tape to build grocery ads.
Detailed work.
Yes. No computers. I did Colorado Guest Guide magazine. I did art ad agencies. I went to work for a check printer doing the illustrated checks and the catalogs and et cetera, and spent nearly 40 years doing that. And I enjoyed doing it. It was exciting. I've got a couple of buildings in Houston with a logo I designed on them, and et cetera. But there is a dirty truth about advertising and marketing and sales, and that is the purpose of advertising is to make people unhappy. And people say, huh? They don't quite understand. What do you mean? Well, think about it. Advertising, if you just had that new shirt, that new car, that new cologne, then you'd be happy. And then the cycle begins again. You're unhappy. You don't have the newest car. You need to get a new dress. You need to pick up the latest trend.
Right.
And so it's just this cycle, and I felt...
You're never satisfied until you get the next thing.
And I felt a little bit complicit in that. So I got a little restless, and it was about 10 years ago, I think, I woke up one morning and realized that I had not drawn anything, a piece of art, other than designing logos and layouts and, the illustrations for those. But I hadn't really drawn anything for almost 15 years.
And there was an artist inside of you screaming to come out.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So I sat down at the drawing board, and my wife encouraged me, and we started, I put together some pieces, and we went and did an art show in Houston, first Saturday art market down in the Heights. Been around for a long time, and I thought that was pretty cool. But the curator of the show came by and looked at my work, and he said, you do good work, but you need to focus, because if you do everything, people will remember nothing. And I took that to heart, and I thought about when you see Christina's World, it's Andrew Wyatt. When you see Marilyn, it's Andy Warhol, a couple of Andrews there. And so I realized I needed to have something unique, a distinct style, unique subject matter. And just prior to this, one of my jobs I had been selling high school yearbooks to Indian schools on reservations.
This was before you did your graphic artwork, before you went into commercial.
No, I had kind of evolved into sales.
Okay.
And so I was working for a native-owned firm in Denver, remotely. I was in Houston, but selling office products.
Okay.
And I went to them with the idea, hey, let's try this. I've got a company that'll print the yearbooks that I know, and we can go out and sell, because the high school yearbook companies don't represent indigenous. I'd like to see them put together yearbooks that has their designs, their culture, and et cetera represented in it. So I kind of bargained with them for me to do that. My wife and I took off on this trip through the Southwest, based mainly in Arizona, but kind of throughout the whole thing. It was just amazing. The people and that I met, and the places I saw, places most people would never see. I mean, off the grid.
Yeah.
I remember we were in Arizona, and there were two tribes on different time zones, and they were literally right across the street from one another. So I kept getting my appointment times mixed up. But I had my last appointment, and we took off, and I'm following the directions they gave us, and the highway became a blacktop, and the blacktop turned into a dirt road, and I called the school and said, hey, something's wrong. And they said, no, just keep going. So I kept following the dirt road, and it ended, and there was a field. And I called them again, and they said, you see the tire tracks, the ruts in the field? Yeah, follow those.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I finally see the school in the distance, or the destination, but here comes this herd of sheep, and nobody around but two dogs. The two dogs knew what they were doing. They were herding
the sheep.
the sheep. So it was just
Wow.
a real eye-opener. I mean, we were off the grid,
Yeah,
to say the
absolutely.
least. So I reflected on this advice of focusing on something, and what could I do that I could be passionate about that would hold my interest and be unique? And I settled on this idea of
Native American.
Native Americans, indigenous peoples.
Fascinating, fascinating. So that was where that all started then.
That's where that all started.
Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little.
Okay.
Prior to that, after you finished your studies, you decided to go on a backpacking trip to
Yeah.
Europe for 3 months, and which a lot of kids do. I mean, I did that. I didn't backpack. I did the URL pass and travel.
I did the same.
So, so it's something, I think it's kind of a rite of passage. I think it's just a great experience to have. But in your case, that led you to meeting some very wonderful people, including your idol. And I'd like to hear about that meeting.
Well, it was kind of bizarre. I was supposed to be going with another art school buddy, and we had our rail pass and our airline tickets and, book of youth hostels and et cetera, and the backpack. But at the last minute, he dropped out. So here's a 20-year-old kid from Great Bend, Kansas, going off to Europe by himself. I had a $160 a month check coming in from Social Security from my father.
Yep.
And so
That was it.
that was it. I had that wired to me every month and took off. And so with the rail pass, I just would walk into a train station and look and say, where do I want to go today?
Yep.
And I went from Amsterdam north to Morocco south and every place in between. But it was in Paris, in the train station, that I met some other American travelers with my age, and we got to talking, and I said, well, what do you do? Oh, I'm going to art school. And they said, and as the conversation went on, I said, Dali is somebody I admire. Well, you should go meet him. I'm like, what? They said, oh, he's either here in Paris at the Hotel St. Maurice, or he's in New York at the Hotel St. Regis, or he's at his home in Spain near Cadaqués in Figueres. And so I ran to the hotel in Paris. No, he's at his home. And so got on a train and headed out. Got to as far as the train would take me, got on a bus, and I was seated between two rather large women with live chickens being held by their feet. And endured that bus ride, but at the end of the bus ride, I still had another 5 miles to hike in. And so I left my backpack and everything in the train station in a locker and walked in. And the first thing that blew my mind was there was this bay, and it was this molten rock that I thought had come from his imagination in all his paintings.
Yeah.
But it was real.
It was there.
And walked to the door, knocked on the door.
Just like that.
Well, the people had told me he had a habit of meeting any art student that would come to
Really?
see him.
He was that approachable, I guess.
That
Yeah.
approachable,
Yeah.
honoring,
Yeah.
artists. And I knocked on the door, and the butler answered, and behind the butler was an 8-foot tall polar bear, stuffed, holding a chandelier in one paw. By the way, it was dyed purple. And had the umbrella stand between its hind legs.
Oh my gosh.
And so he came.
You knew you were at the right place.
Indeed. And the house itself, it had eggs on each,
Yeah.
huge plaster eggs on top of each tower, and et cetera. So he showed me in, and there he was in
Wow.
a white jumpsuit and pacing back and forth with one of his canes. And
With his mustache.
With his
Yeah.
mustache.
Wow.
And there was about 4 business people all lined up, and I don't know if it was staged or for his pleasure or whatever, but they were all dressed identical. They all had a bowler hat in their lap, sitting like this, and they looked like they came out of a Magritte painting. Oh. And he was lecturing them, and I walked in, and he paused, and he said, do you speak French? And I said, no. And he said, okay, well, you go see Madame Gala. Her English is much better than mine. So I was shown to a room upstairs, and I was waiting, and had been a while. I went to pull a book off the shelf just to see what kind of books were there, and the whole shelf of books came out because they were just empty bindings, all hooked together. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to touch anything else here. And Madame Gala came rushing in and said, where are you from? I said, Denver. And what are you doing here? I said, well, I wanted to sound impressive. I've come to see the great art museums of Europe. And she paused and looked at me and said, it is better you go look at one painting, go back to Denver and look at one painting and go walk in the snow. And she walked out. And again, I was kind of speechless. And here I was, what am I supposed to do now? Finally, Dali came bounding upstairs and said, where's your piece? Well, what do you mean? Your piece, your art. I always trade. And with any student, it was all at the train station.
Oh, Brett, oh.
And, I had a sketchbook I was carrying with me, and et cetera. And he said, well, too bad, thank you. And I was showing out. Now, years later, when I was working at the Czech printing company, I was working with an art dealer commissioning art for Czechs, and he had a press sheet of Dante's Inferno that had been illustrated by Salvador Dali. So I finally got my Dali piece.
So you got your Dali
piece.
Oh, Brett, what an incredible experience. I mean, that is something for life. It's just not very many people can have that type of an experience directly with an artist. Amazing.
Well, I found a little one-room hostel for the night in the local town, and I laid down and looked at the ceiling, and it was just, what just happened?
Yeah, exactly. Did you keep a journal? Did you write these things?
I did.
I
did. It's up in the attic. I pull it out every now and then.
Fascinating.
No.
What a wonderful experience. Well, all right. We'll come back now to what we really are here to talk about. This, of course, was fascinating, but I want to talk about your art. So you explained how you got into the Native American portraiture. Why do you call yourself an active artist?
Well, I call myself an artist activist because I'm trying to bring attention to the story. And I have a couple of mantras, if you will, that keep me on the path. One is that what I'm trying to do is to give a voice to the people who have been silenced, give eyes to people who do not see, and to give a heart to those people that just don't want to care about it. And I think it was Banksy who first said this, but I've taken it to heart as well. And that is that art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And so I would like to think that in some small way my pieces might give comfort to those who lived through it, their ancestors, and it might make those people who want to dismiss it and forget it uncomfortable. And the epitome of that came at a show in Albuquerque, huge outdoor festival. I think there were 300 artists under 3 big circus tents in between the balloon launch and an Indian casino. But I was sitting in the tent with all my pieces out, and I had one piece of a rather waif-looking girl standing in front of a stucco wall, and this elderly native man came rolling in a wheelchair. And he had gloves on, wheeling himself, leather gloves, and he stopped and just froze in front of that piece. And one thing I learned in interaction with them is when they have nothing to say, they don't say anything. Mm-hmm. You know, it's they don't make small talk. And he was looking at it and pointed at it, and I walked over to him and said, "Do you like that?" And he didn't answer. And so I waited. Me, I like to talk. Hard to wait without saying anything. And he finally, I saw him take off his glove, and his hand went up to his eye, and he was crying.
Oh, my gosh.
And I waited, and he finally told me, he said, "That reminds me of a girl I knew in Indian boarding school." Now, Indian boarding school was in the early part of the 1900s, the country's attempt to
Americanize, yeah.
Americanize, and the government motto was kill the Indian to save the child.
Yes.
They came and took the children from their parents. They cut their hair, they burned their clothes, they wouldn't allow them to speak their own tongue, beat them if they did. And so he had lived through that.
Oh.
And for me as an artist, to think that paint on a canvas could elicit
That emotion.
that emotion.
Oh, Brett, amazing. Yeah.
You know, whatever else I do, awards or recognition or whatever, sales, I won't top it.
Oh, I can't, yeah. That speaks, you know, that tells you everything about why you should do what you do, and gives you the motivation to
Yes.
do it. Amazing. Oh, amazing. Your favorite medium then is
Acrylic.
acrylic. I notice you talk that you really maintain a 4-color palette.
I do. You know, I research all of this in the Library of Congress and other sources to be historically accurate. And as a part of that style, I was careful. I didn't want to go down the Remington-Russell path because, I mean, beautiful pieces and they were living in the moment, but the scenes, I mean, it wasn't like everybody stood there still while they painted them.
Right, exactly.
So there was some coming out of their head. And then there, on the other side, is the beautiful contemporary stylized stuff that the indigenous people, the native artists, do themselves. And I didn't want to infringe on that, cultural appropriation or whatever, so I wanted to find a style. And I landed on this 4-color palette somewhat by accident. I had started with pencil and then went to kind of a style that was what I call a poster style. If you remember the original Obama Hope poster, that kind of style. And so I wanted to paint, but I had never painted. And so I've started doing the native portraits in that style with just 4 colors. And gradually those hard lines of light and shadow started to blend together to the realistic look. So there's 2 browns and 2 yellows. Then there is a 5th color, which is the background. And what it does is it presents itself as contemporary and bright colors, but it suggests sepia tone.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the historical bent. And again, at one of these art festivals, I try to bring them to life with these colors and make them you know, hey, this is a real person. A dusty old black and white photo or whatever, just that might as well be on Mars. And so again, at one of these festivals, I got the what I consider the ultimate compliment. Somebody was looking at one of the pieces and said, "Oh, did they pose for you?" And no.
Yeah. They're from the research that you did. Let's look at some of that work.
Great.
I know that we've got some that. Let's look at this first one and tell me. Oh my gosh, look at that. She's just, I mean, amazing.
Well, all my pieces I researched not only the visual element, but the historical background and try to learn a little bit. You know, there were over 500 tribes in the U.S., and so there's a lot of different stories. Now, this is this one is called Sweetgrass Sorrow, and this is a Skokomish woman up in the Spokane area, and the tribe lived near a river that was separated by a field of sweetgrass, and every day they would walk to the river to fish, and they would have baskets made of sweetgrass to carry the fish back to the camp. And this woman had been a weaver of the sweetgrass basket, as illustrated in the picture, her whole life. But a developer from Spokane acquired the land between them and the river and wiped out
The sweetgrass.
them.
Oh.
So that's the title.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's such a story. Let's go to the next one. What's the next one?
This
Oh,
one
look at her.
is titled Forgotten, and this is, and I say forgotten because, as I say, we're more than 500 tribes, and most people know maybe a half dozen, you know, Cheyenne, Apache, whatever.
Yeah.
This is an Arikara girl, and if I don't know if you ever saw the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Revenant.
Yes.
The Indian tribe that chased him off
Yes.
the cliff were Arikara.
Okay.
And the unique thing so Forgotten is kind of, okay, who's ever heard of Arikara?
Right.
But when I was doing my research, I was fascinated by the ornamentation on her dress, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And
Is it shells?
that's what I thought, but it was a plains tribe. They weren't near the ocean. So I dug, and I learned finally those are elk teeth.
Wow.
And if you look closely at it, you can see the stitching
shape.
and how they... And the elk each elk only has 4 of this particular tooth.
Oh, wow.
So the number that she has on her dress would suggest that she was pretty high in the hierarchy, maybe a chief's daughter or some such thing.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and that's all from your research. From
Yes.
Amazing, Brett. All right, and I think we've got another one. Oh, look at her. Oh.
Well, this one I'm going to tell you a very short story.
Wow. Oh, wow.
I'm not known for short stories. But this is an Apache, and the title is Unbroken, and I think the eyes say it all. And
Do you start with eyes?
I do start with eyes. I paint backwards. I've never taken any training in painting, and I'm afraid to because it might.
They'll change. Yeah.
But most people lay in the background and rough out, but the entire figure, and then go in and do the detail. But I do the eyes down to the final detail before I start building the face around it. And Bev, my wife, will always come in, and I'll feel her behind me as I'm sitting at the easel, and I'll turn. Okay, what? You don't have the eyes right. And she's always right.
Yeah.
And it's the tiniest little thing, the tiniest little brush stroke, but she's right, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, so this Apache, I don't know, is it it looks very determined, very.
Well, and that's why the title
Yeah.
Unbroken.
Yeah, yeah.
And, they were primarily in New Mexico. And today, New Mexico has one of the largest indigenous populations, New Mexico and Arizona. And and of course, Geronimo was Apache.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
were fierce warriors, and there's, I forget, it's something like 15 pueblos across New Mexico now. We visited the one in Taos,
Yes.
and people still live there. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited structures in North America.
It's an amazing place. I've been there too, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think we have one more. Yes, tell me about this one.
Well, this one just came off the easel a couple of weeks ago, and the title of this is Where the Buffalo Used to Roam, or rather, Where the Buffalo No Longer Roam.
Look at the texture in that blanket. Oh my gosh.
So the field behind this is Mary Red Cloud. She was a wife of Chief Red Cloud, who, along with Crazy Horse and Setting Bull, led the battle, not of Wounded Knee, but Little Bighorn, Battle of Little Bighorn. And so the Lakota, she's Lakota Sioux, and they were such fierce warriors that as the settlers began coming in, and the government was trying to, contain them, they were just kicking the government behind. And so much so that the government, the only time in history the U.S. government had to be on the other side of the treaty table. And they drew up a treaty and gave the Lakota Sioux a large part of South Dakota and northern Nebraska. And this was to be theirs. And it immediately started getting violated. The government had promised food and had promised, no encroachment and et cetera. But then gold was discovered in the Black Hills. And the government changed tactics because what they had been doing brought them to the treaty table, and that wasn't working. So they cut off their food. They, instead of sending troops to fight them, they encouraged settlers to encroach. And they just streamed in because of the gold. And then they started one of the most insidious things, I think, of all. The buffalo was somewhat sacred, and they were the primary food supply. And in the 1500s, shortly after Columbus arrived, there were 50 million buffalo in North America, primarily in the plains. And so the government, recognizing this, began a campaign of slaughtering the buffalo. And the trains came through, and people would ride on the trains and just shoot the buffalo at random. At one point, there was a 3-year period where there were 5,000 buffalo killed per day.
Oh.
So it went from 50 million, and it decimated their food supply. And that's what actually led them to the Battle of Little Bighorn, was, okay, we're going to stop this. And because they had violated the treaty, and they cut off the food supply, and then, of course, Battle of Wounded Knee came, where they, and that was kind of the end. But in 1910, they were down to 325 buffalo in the entire U.S.
Oh my gosh.
About 50 of those were in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And so finally, people began conservation efforts with the buffalo, and they now there are 500,000 in the U.S. with 5,000 of those in Yellowstone. But Mary Red Cloud lived through all this, and she lived to 103.
Oh, wow.
And so she saw, the prime, she saw the decimation, and she saw the buffalo start to come back. So.
Oh, what a story. Well, Brett, my gosh, you know so much about Native American history and through your research and all these wonderful pieces that you have made. Where do you have them? And I wonder, there must be a Native American museum or someplace where it should all be exhibited, I think. I mean, I just feel like you've just contributed so much to the culture.
Well, there's a lot of Native American museums and a lot of Western art and Native American art out there. And so, I'm working through the process. As I say, we did the art festivals for a number of years and always got a lot of attention there, and always quite an ego trip to have 10,000 people over a weekend walk through. And the funny thing is that the colors would just stop them dead in their tracks, and they'd just stop. But so some attention there. Now what I'm doing, of course, I exhibit at the Conroe Gallery, but there are invitational shows, like Cal has a national invitational throughout the country, and I've focused on those that are doing the Western art, and I ship pieces off. I put them in, they get accepted or not, and judged, and et cetera. I've won a few awards with those, so just working that circuit and trying, there's the Venn diagram of why do you do this, and people try to figure that out, and I came down to one that was reward, which would be sales, recognition, awards, and the act of doing, the skill.
Right.
And so to me, it's the primary thing is I want to get better at what I do. That's my primary focus. Sales are nice, but that's the tertiary. Secondary is recognition, not for me, but recognition of the message that I'm trying to communicate.
Yes.
So, I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I'm good with that. And if it goes, doesn't ever become some big thing, that's fine with me.
Well,
I'm happy with every piece that I do.
You can be so proud. They're really unique and amazing pieces, and your passion for what you do is very much seen through the work that you do. They're amazing, fascinating pieces of art. So I guess now that we're about, we can sum it up. I'd like to know what brought you to the Conroe Art League and what brought you to Conroe.
Well, my wife and I, when we were first married, we lived in Colorado. We transferred to California, and then took a company transfer to Texas. And our parents were up in Kansas. And so we flew through Conroe on I-45 a couple of times a year to go up and see our parents, but we never stopped. And so we had a timeshare week that we had to use it or lose it. And we really didn't have the time or money to go anywhere exotic. And so, hey, there's a timeshare up on Lake Conroe. Let's go do that. And I've always worked remote, so my company never knew I was anywhere. I have a laptop and a phone as far as they're concerned.
That's all you needed.
So we came up and we were flabbergasted to get all 545. Oh my God, there's tall pines, there's water. We never knew this was here. And so we wandered downtown one day, and oh my God, they have a gallery here. And walked around the corner, Crichton Theater, and we were just blown away by this is an art community.
Thank you again so much, and thank you for spending your time with us again today. Remember that we are so fortunate to have this our Conroe Art League where we can create, appreciate, and learn, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.